Hello and welcome to Loco Jano podcast. My name is Srishti, host for today's session. Today we are going to talk on a very important topic on environmental law. Recently, the government proposed the Forest Conservation Amendment Bill 2023 in Lok Sabha. Conservation experts have opposed it, citing that it will divert forests for commercial projects. To discuss this issue in detail, we have a very important guest, Mr. Utkarsh Jain. Mr. Utkarsh Jain is a Dharamshala based advocate with immense experience in environmental law. He is the founder of Himalayan Advocacy Center, a public interest environmental law firm.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, and I'll just start with the first question. Can you briefly describe your inspiring journey in the environmental law field?
Yeah, sure. It's not been that long. Probably it's been quite some years. I graduated in 2016 with my undergraduate law degree, and since then I started practicing environmental law. I was doing litigation at the National Green Tribunal, and then I briefly went abroad to study, do my master's in law. After coming back in 2021, I decided to uh, start my own practice and started this law firm or non-profit. We've registered it as a non-profit under the Companies Act. It's called Himalayan Advocacy Center. My specialization is in environmental litigation. My research interests lie in deliberative democracy, and that's my post law school journey.
Yeah, that was really wonderful to hear. Now, coming to the topic, large amount of ecologically rich forests which are not government notified before 25th October 1980 and will be the outside the scope of the act. Does it mean that all the rich forest areas like Aravallis, Western Ghats are vulnerable to exploitation for mining and safari zone without any safeguards?
The Aravallis is a very complex issue. To get to the basics, there was an order passed by the Supreme Court on 12th December 1996, which essentially said that everything which comes under the dictionary definition of forests will be protected under the Forest Conservation Act. So, Section 2 of the Forest Conservation Act prohibits the diversion. Diversion is a legal term, is a term of art. So, to say to clear forests or to break up forest land, any such thing is not to be allowed unless permission from central government is given. And then a detailed procedure was laid out under the rules for that. So, up until now, even as things stand, everything that comes under the dictionary definition of forests is protected under this act, and you need permission of the central government and various other authorities. For example, there's a national capital region planning board. There's various other authorities that you need permission under. But briefly stating, what this law intends to do is that it intends to do away with certain patches of land uh, as forests. So it intends to unlock a certain area of land throughout India, including private forests, including forests near roads, including forests which are in proximity to the national border or line of control from this prohibition under the Forest Conservation Act. So, in that sense, as things stand today, Aravallis are still protected. So, this bill has been sent to a parliamentary committee. So, right now, we'll have to wait and see what kind of consultations happen, and then only we'll be able to see what happens.
That was interesting to hear. Actually, we're talking about the 1996 Supreme Court judgment about widening the definition of forest area. So, could you tell us, like, if the bill passes or becomes a law, then all the precedents will that become ineffective, like forest area just becomes narrow in future?
One thing with this bill is that the forest area will not become narrow, but certain exceptions will be carved out. So if you read the text of the bill itself, a lot of areas are intended to be covered under forest area. So, and the reason for this is that to create additional carbon sinks, which India has committed for under the Paris Agreement. So, although the areas will not become narrow, certain exceptions will be created, as I mentioned, for forested areas near the border region and near railway lines, near roads. But to understand this bill, you need to understand that the Indian government today has a very different policy of looking at forests as compared to the earlier governments, uh, under whom, when India got independence, under whom the agenda was very different. The agenda today is to take as much control of forests and to not only do that, to convert that into carbon sinks as India has committed, and also to prioritize India's strategic development. So, insofar as anything comes in the way of that strategic government, the intention of this bill is to take all these legal barriers, as they call it, out of those strategic developments.
That's interesting. There was recent deforestation in Nicobar, and it will be compensated by creation of a jungle safari in Haryana, and it is being seen as an attempt to monetize forest. Now, will this bill encourage more compensatory afforestation and enable states to harness forest for financial gains? What do you think?
The short title, which is the title by which we recognize the acts, it's right now called the Forest Conservation Act 1980, but the proposal is to change this to one samrakshan and samvardhan niyam. So this means that uh, sanrakshan we understand as conservation, but samvardhan, I looked up the meaning of this, is so to say foster or develop. So I think that is one thing that we need to understand, and I think the government's plans, when we look at ecotourism or say these safari parks, come within this broader aspect of developing or development, or so to say that we develop these natural areas into for the purposes of ecotourism or things like safari. For example, in Nu and Gurugram districts, the proposal is to have a 10,000 acre large safari park, and the purpose of that is to, and that area is covered in the Aravlis, which you had mentioned earlier. So the purpose is that even if you look at Aravlis, that's forested land, and even if it's bushland or grassland, uh, all of which is very important for the ecological development of that area. But the purpose, if you see, if you look at it in terms of even the short title, which is not only samrakshan but samvardhan, which is to develop that into these safaris and ecotourism hotspots. So I think to that extent, the government wants these things to become easier, and one of the main aims of this bill is to do that.
Quite interesting to hear. I'll talk about the one of the exemptions that you just mentioned, that the bill exempts forests in close proximity to international borders. Now, the issue is that there's significant forest in Himalayan, Trans-Himalayan, northeastern region, which will get more forest clearance in future without any mitigation and assessment plan. So the question is, will it lead to more exploitation in such areas? For instance, the lithium mining proposal at eco-sensitive zone like Riyasi, Jammu and Kashmir. What do you think?
Oh, so you for that, not the entire area is a forest land. In fact, a lot of villagers are in support of that. But and this is just one law. There are various other laws. This law is connected to, for example, uh, the Land Acquisition Procedure, Acquisition Act. It's covered under Environment Protection Act. So you can't simply say that just because one bill is proposed, the entire area is going to get impacted, and without any checks or balances whatsoever. But one very important takeaway from the language of this bill is that anything which is of strategic interest or national interest, if you read the text of the bill, and if I can just quote that, paragraph 4, proposed to be used for construction of strategic linear project or of national importance and concerning national security. Then you go on and then you come across words like construction of security related infrastructure. So I think, and defense related project, or camp for paramilitary forces in left wing extremism affected areas. So I think insofar as anything relates to the national security, and this goes back to the Nicobar issue as well. In fact, recently the National Green Tribunal sought for the reassessment of the environmental clearance. And one of the things that they noted was, although they're not supposed to, and that's a different discussion, but they did point out to this Bharat Mala or string of pearls strategy. So, insofar as that concerns national security of the country, I think the certain checks and balances, at least under this act, are sought to be removed by the government.
It's very interesting angle to see, like where there are different laws that we haven't looked into apart from this bill that should be looked upon. There's another exemption in the bill which exempts lands which are proposed for public utility projects. Now, is this some form of an incentive for private investment that will have repercussions on the rights and livelihoods of forest dwelling communities, just like we saw in Joshimat crisis? Are we going to repeat that thing again with the bill?
So I think this was in context of the defense-related projects and public utility projects in left-wing extremist affected areas. But generally, I think the public utilities that this bill is referring to, even if you go down, are things like checkposts, or construction of fencing, boundary marks, or wireless communication, construction of fire lines, things like that. So Joshimat is definitely, I think Joshimat Forest Conservation Act is very important for things like Joshimat, because forests, as you know, are very important in retaining land which is at a certain angle, retaining forest land in it's retaining land which might be landslide prone, or which might be steep, which might be at a slope. So I think the intention is to, while protecting forests, so if it is a reserve forest, then there's no question about it, but while protecting forests, also to ensure that certain government facilities like checkposts and so on and so forth are permitted. So I think the intention is not to impact as such areas like Joshimat, but if there are in defense and strategic areas, and even if that happens, there's a Supreme Court judgment on the Chardham case, which still requires the government to take certain checks and balances. So I think this particular act will have to be read in the context of various other laws and Supreme Court judgments.
Now, my next question is that the bill was also sent to a select committee instead of a standing committee, which is meant for environmental and forest laws. Do you think it was done purposely to just escape scrutiny?
No, I wouldn't like to ascribe any intention, but I think a standing committee is a higher level of scrutiny. A select committee, as far as I know, is headed by honorable member of parliament that is from the ruling party. So we'll have to wait and watch how they undertake their consultations. And various organizations are sending in comments as we speak. So we'll have to wait and see. But definitely, I think there was, even if you see on Sansad TV or Lok Sabha TV, there was a huge amount of furor on this, and members of parliament were asking for higher scrutiny. And so, definitely, at least the opposition is trying to point at some of these things that you had mentioned. But we'll have to wait and see, is what my point is.
So that's really interesting. Now I'm coming to the end of the section. Like finally, what do you think is the future of environment protections in India if we keep on passing such bills? Like there some ray of hope?
No, definitely. I think one thing that when I was thinking of on this topic is that if you see various other, not just this bill, if you see last year in 2022, we had the forest conservation rules which were amended. Then in 2020, we had the EIA notification, which was sought to be amended. Then we have various bunch of amendments proposed to the Air Act, to the Water Act, to the Public Liability Insurance Act, to Environment Protection Act. And uh, over and above, you see, if you go to any of these government websites, you see office memorandums, circulars, things which are just passed, and they're meant to just be communiques between different government offices. So these are usually passed by the government, and they intend to dilute laws, at least visibly intending to dilute laws. But what we should never forget is that there are certain constitutional protections that are there. So one example that I was thinking of, that in the times of climate change, these huge corporations like BlackRock or Shell, they're trying to distract the common people by feeding them this narrative that, okay, if you'll use paper straws in your drinks, you'll be able to stop climate change. But the aim over here should not be to get just confused or stuck in constantly looking at these small changes. And by small changes, I mean you have the constitution on one side, and then you have these piecemeal small amendments on one side, and so on and so forth. Over the years, thousands and thousands of pages collect, and you can keep on analyzing them. But you have some protection, some constitutional principles like liberty, equality, and fraternity. So if there is problems in a forest area where tribal people live, if they are not being treated equally to other people who are living in cities, to other people who are living in other areas, if there is social disharmony being caused, then that comes under the basic structure of our constitution. No law, no bill, no change, no office memorandum can do anything to stop that. And as lawyers or as people interested in the law, if such things are happening, and if people have bona fide problems and grievances with that, and there are certain things that we can see happening, then definitely the courts of law, there's a lot of remedies available before the courts of law, right from the National Green Tribunal to the Supreme Court to even District Magistrates Court. So we should always look at the Constitution of India and what it intended, and the intention was definitely to uh, support, to protect the dignity of all the people of this country, not just people living in metropolitan cities.
That was really a wonderful session. It comes to the end of the session for today. If you would like to add anything, like any topic which I missed out on this bill, you can just let me know, or should I just conclude the session for now?
No, I think that was good.
It's
I think this bill, I think we had a. I would encourage your viewers to go and read this bill. It's a small 7-page document, and it will be very enlightening for them to see what is actually going on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful session. I hope it will clear out any doubt our audience had regarding the bill. And if you have any doubt, you can let us know in the comment section, or you can contact Mr. Utkarsh via his profile link, which we will link in the comment section. Thank you so much. And please follow us for more such podcasts in the future. Goodbye and take care.